Hello, welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be reading the top 10 romance finalists in the 2020 Goodreads Choice Awards. The goal for this video is to read all of the nominees, rank them as I read them, and then at the end, hopefully select a winner for the Goodreads Choice Awards, and also at the very end, compare what my choice was to what the actual winner is. I did this challenge last year and I had a lot of fun doing it, but the circumstances surrounding this year's Goodreads Choice Awards are a little different than last year's, and it's leaving me a little bit nervous. So first off, a lot of readers I know, because I've seen videos, were pretty unhappy with the selections for this year's Goodreads Choice Awards, and it's kind of unsurprising just looking at the list. Some of these are books that I think are completely overhyped and were really pushed at us by the big publishing houses, but that didn't really get a lot of attention on YouTube or on Instagram. And it's irritating because last year we could definitely brush aside some of those choices as, oh, they were just popular, but a lot of the books on this list, like even if they were really hyped by publishers, they're really not hyped by people in the community. So it's like, how did they make it on this list? It's a little weird. Secondly, on a more personal level, I read 4 of the 10 selections last year before the Goodreads Choice Awards had even started, which in my opinion kind of means something. I am definitely not someone who reads every single romance that comes out, but reading 4 of the 10 means that the ones that I did read were probably pretty popular, right? This year, I've only read 2 of the 10 selections, and I gotta be honest with you, most of the other books that were nominated this year, the other 8 books, are not really books that I am super excited about. There is one that I haven't read yet that I'm kind of excited about, but the other 7, I guess, books, I probably wouldn't have picked up on my own, and I'm kind of nervous to get into them. And then lastly, I think the most obvious glaring issue this year is that there are virtually no indie published romances on this list. And this year especially, I've noticed how much attention indie romance gets in the book community, whether it's on Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Indie romances are king. Everybody's talking about Vicious by LJ Shen years later, or books by Penelope Douglas, Kennedy Ryan, names that you've probably heard before if you've read any romance. None of these authors were on this list, even though they all put books out this year. And it's just kind of surprising to me that not a single indie romance got on this list. I guess you could consider something like Regretting You by Colleen Hoover or From Blood and Ash by JLA, but they still were not technically indie published. I mean, I guess it depends on where you draw the line, but they didn't self-publish these books, and these are books that I think probably would have gotten a lot of hype anyway. Colleen Hoover and JLA are really big authors who have been traditionally published before, so I don't know. I just am not impressed by the selection of books on this list for a multitude of reasons, but especially because there are really no indies on this list, and indies have such a big share of the romance market, it just surprises me, I guess. With all that being said, I'm a little bit scared going into this video, but let's go ahead and talk about the books that I've already read. So first off, we have Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is easily one of the most hyped romances of the year, and in my opinion was probably one of the most overhyped romances as well. It's about a romance writer named January who is going through kind of a rough time. She's in a romance writing slump, and she decides that she's going to go to an old summer home that she went to with her family, and she's going to try to find some inspiration there. While she's there, she runs into a guy that she was in her, I think, writing master's program with, a guy named Gus, and Gus is also going through a hard time, also in a writing slump, and I think he writes general fiction, and they decide, after a lot of banter and quirky moments, that they're gonna switch genres for the summer and hopefully find some inspiration. To do this, they are going to kind of team up and show each other different things, I guess, in life to kind of inspire them. Gus takes January and shows her some kind of creepy, hardcore stuff to write for literary fiction, and she shows him a good time, romantic time. I didn't hate this book, but it felt just a little bit empty to me. Do you ever just pick up a book and you're reading it and you can totally understand why other people like it, but it's just not really doing anything for you? That's how I felt about this book. I think the main issue that I had with this book was the tone. I just feel like this book didn't really know what it wanted to be. It had quirky, generic characters that you see in a lot of rom-coms, and it had that silly premise of let's swap genres, but the actual feeling and the actual things that are discussed in this book are definitely not what I would consider lighthearted. On top of that, I just feel like the romance ultimately took a backseat to a lot of the things that happened in this book. January is dealing with a lot, Gus is also dealing with a lot. Overall, the book is just a lot, but it is not a lot of romance. It's just a lot of other stuff that I personally just didn't care much about. I like when a romance can strike the balance between plot and romance, but this book I think just kind of fell short for me because it didn't develop the romance in a way that I felt was adequate. I do think that Gus and January's relationship was healthy and it was cute, and I do think it had that whole guy secretly pines for you for years thing that a lot of people can relate to and enjoy, but but it just wasn't enough ultimately to overcome some of the other issues that I had with the book. So I gave this one 3 stars. So the next book that I've already read is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and this is another one that if you asked me which books do I think most people have read if they read romance this year, it would be these 2 books, Beach Read and From Blood and Ash. This one, I literally cannot escape. I am not on social media right now except for TikTok, and for some reason I am on From Blood and Ash TikTok. I cannot escape Poppy and Hawk. Anyway, this book is about a girl named Poppy who is a maiden, and a maiden in the society is one person, and she is supposed to be this kind of like holy figure and preside over different ceremonies and things that are happening. And Poppy, of course, doesn't really like her role in society because she would rather just kill men and have sex with them. Well, not the same men that she kills, but you get the point. So in the opening scene of this book, Poppy escapes the palace where she lives with the Duke and Duchess of this kingdom, and she goes to this den of iniquity where she meets this guy named Hawk. Hawk is this kind of notorious guy. I don't know, he like kills people and does stuff, and anyway, Poppy knows who this guy is and she's trying to kind of avoid him. She crossed paths with him at this den of iniquity, and then lo and behold, a couple of days later, he ends up being her new bodyguard. And then of course plot stuff happens, yada yada. I'm not gonna get into the details though because, you know, it's a fantasy and I don't want to ruin the plot. So this is another one of those books that I totally understand why people enjoy. It's definitely kind of a Sarah J Maas ripoff, but with a lot more sex. I vlogged my experience reading this book in a video where I read some fantasy romances, and I correctly predicted almost all of the plot twists that occurred in this book, which is not necessarily a sign that the book is bad, but I mean, it wasn't anything super special. It had been touted as this like remarkable fantasy romance, and while I thought the romance was perfectly fine and actually kind of hot, I didn't feel like the fantasy aspect was really that great. I think there was a lot of info dumping, and ultimately the story was just nothing super special or new or unique. It just kind of felt like another Sarah J Maas book. That, coupled with the fact that this book was, I think, nearly 600 pages, definitely too long, this book was just a 3-star read for me. Am I excited to read the sequel? Kind of, but again, just not necessarily the best book that I've read this year. So we're not off to a strong start. I've already read 2 of these books and I thought they were just kind of okay. Hopefully I can find another book in these next 8 that really wows me. So let me quickly run through those and then we can get into the vlog portion of this video. So the first book is You Had Me at Hola by Alexis Daria. This is a book that I believe is centered around 2 telenovela stars who are together in this show and then hate each other off screen or something. I don't really know. I don't want to know the details. I'll figure it out when I read it. The next book is Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. This is one that seems kind of like a Red, White, and Royal Blue ripoff just from the cover and kind of the premise. I know it's probably a little different, and I know a lot of people I am friends with on Goodreads really enjoyed this book, so hopefully this is one that I end up enjoying. The Happy Ever After playlist by Abby Jimenez. This is one where I believe our heroine's fiance died. In her grief, she ends up finding this lost dog. Apparently the dog actually belongs to someone, and she ends up getting with the guy whose dog it is, I think. Next is Take a Hint, Danny Brown by Talia Hibbert. This is one that I was kind of hinting at that I was excited to read, and this is about a fake dating kind of relationship, opposites attract, between a security guard and one of the Brown sisters from the previous books. Next is Want to Watch by Kate Stayman London. This is one with a kind of bachelorette type premise and a plus-size heroine. Next is The Switch by Beth O'Leary. This is a grandma and granddaughter switch places kind of romance. I don't think they end up like dating the respective age group of their person they're switching with. Basically, I don't think that the granddaughter's gonna get with an old man. However, they're switching places to kind of like, I don't know, revitalize their life and whatever. Next up, Regretting You by Colleen Hoover. This is one, again, I think it's like a mother and daughter. They don't switch places, but it's told from both of their points of view as they kind of fall in love. And then lastly, In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. This is one of those classic, what if she ended up with a different man than she's married to kind of romances, kind of giving me Outlander or Maybe in Another Life by Taylor Jenkins Reid vibes. So those are the 8 books that I'm going to be reading in this video. Just looking at the list, personally, I think the winner will probably be either Take a Hint, Danny Brown or From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I will be interested to see if there are books on this list that I end up really liking, if they're 5-star reads, but to do that I have to get into the video. I have to get into the vlog portion of the video. So let's go. I'm trying really hard to withhold my judgment and to go into these books with an open mind, but it's challenging when the description of this book has it hailed, or this author hailed, as the new JoJo Moyes. I read The Flatshare last year and I ended up giving it, I want to say 2 stars, maybe 3 stars. I didn't hate it, I didn't think it was terrible, but it definitely was not what I would consider a romance. So I knew that going into this book that it would likely not be a traditional romance. Understatement of the century. 50% into this, 54% actually into this, and while the audiobook narration is fantastic, the story is just not a romance. Never really find myself thinking this way, but when I started reading this book, I was like, who's the intended audience for this? Because here's the thing. There are beach reads, books that I think are kind of written to read on a beach and then completely forget about after reading, but this one doesn't even have like the levity that one expects with that kind of book. This is not a beach read. It's also not a steamy romance romance that you want to read at home. It's not really anything. I don't know what this is. I don't, the characters are perfectly fine. The story is perfectly fine, if a little bit derivative and boring. It's just not a romance, and to have to read it for this video is like upsetting me. And I'm just hoping that I picked the least romantic book first. Like, I'm hoping that this is the one that is going to be the most definitively not a romance on this list, because like I said, I knew this list was going to be bad. But anyway, okay, let me just tell you what the book's about so we can carry on and I can finish it and just never ever think about this book ever again. So this book is about Lena, who is a high-powered executive living in London, and her sister recently passed away, which is a very heavy theme in this book. So if you don't want to read about the death of a loved one, don't read this book. Her sister recently died, and ever since then she has been having panic attacks at work and not performing to the best of her abilities. She is a very high-powered career woman and has a really hard time making time for anyone else in her life. Her relationship with her boyfriend is like fine, but they don't spend a lot of time together, and she's been neglecting the relationship with her mother. So she goes to visit her grandmother Eileen, who's recently divorced because her husband cheated on her, and Eileen and Lena decide they're going to switch places because Lena is being asked to take 2 months off of work, so she's gonna live in this like small little town and take over Eileen's like projects in town. It's a very like Stars Hollow-esque town situation. So she said she'll take over that, and in the meantime Eileen can go to London and live in Lena's flat and find herself a man, and they have adventures from there. On the surface, it's like not a bad story, honestly. Like, this has not been the worst listening experience ever. I was probably being a bit dramatic, but it's just so patently unromantic. And it's funny because the description of this story says something about this being a romantic novel, a charming romantic novel. There's nothing romantic about it though. It's more about these two kind of like figuring out their own lives and figuring out how to cope with grief and the other kind of challenges in their life rather than the actual romantic component. And I know that for a fact because I'm 54% into this book. We're only now getting Lena's interaction with her current boyfriend, and it's like, okay, well, if this is her first real interaction with him and she's going to get with another man, how is that going to be convincing when you're going to do that like after the 50% mark in a book? And then Eileen has a guy that she's banging, but I know she wanted to find someone to like have a relationship with, so what's that? Anyway, I'm not hating it. It's really not the worst thing ever. I think I'm just frustrated. I'm gonna go ahead and try to finish this up, and then I'll try to give you my final thoughts, but it's looking like this is going to be behind both Beach Read and Blood and Ash, from Blood and Ash. Unsurprisingly, but also it's just like, damn. Alright, hopefully the lighting's not too bad. I don't have my ring light on today, but I just finished The Switch by Beth O'Leary. I don't know what else to say really beyond what I said in the last clip, because this book is just exactly what I thought it would be. Not a romance, and just kind of boring. There wasn't anything particularly noteworthy about this book. The only thing really positive I can say is that it was considerably less depressing than The Flat Shear by Beth O'Leary, which was on the Goodreads Choice Award list last year, and I think, if I'm correct, was the least voted for book, or one of the least voted for books on that list. Again, it just kind of boggles the mind that this book was put on this list in the first place. I've heard little to nothing about it, at least The Flat Shear last year. Like, I heard some buzz about this. I'm just like, what? Ultimately, I just don't feel like the story was that compelling, and I don't feel like any of the relationships that were present in the story were enough to be really like categorized as romance or a romantic relationship. There were two, I guess you could consider them romantic outcomes in this book, but since the story focused very little on romantic relationship development, I just don't feel like this could really be categorized as a romance. I mean, I guess you could call it chick lit, which I hate that term, but I'd say that's a more accurate kind of category for this book. Just not my taste, not something that I would recommend to people, and definitely not something that I think deserves to belong on this list. That sounds bad, but the category is romance, the category is not chick lit. There's just so many other good books that came out this year that I am just sad got snubbed. So anyway, I am going to put this book at dead last on my rankings. I'm gonna pull up the little sheet right now and you can see where it lies, I guess. Pretty obvious, there's just 3 books right now. From Blood and Ash, obviously, is the one I've enjoyed the most, even though it was just a 3-star read for me. Beach Read after that at 3 stars. Honestly, I'm kind of considering changing that one to 2 stars as well. It was fine, but just not a favorite. And then 2 stars again for The Switch. I feel like it can only go up from here. Surely there's going to be some really awesome romances in here, and I'm gonna get a good 5-star read. I need a 5-star read in here because I got one last year. It was fantastic, one of my favorite romances of the year, and I'm just hoping that I will strike gold twice, maybe? Fingers crossed. Next book I'm gonna be reading though is Boyfriend Material, so I'm gonna get started on that, and I will get back to you once I'm like, I don't know, 50% in. Okay, so I know I said I was gonna update you guys at the 50% mark, but I finished this book, and I think that's probably for the best because because this video is going to be too long anyway. So I finished Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall, and I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I ended up enjoying this book so much more than I thought that I would. I don't know, it was partially the cover that was really giving me rip-off Red, White, and Royal Blue vibes, and partially just the beginning of the story. I just wasn't convinced that this was going to be something that I enjoyed. Despite the like fun tone, I didn't like the setup for the story, but that was overcome by the characters, and I was just like honestly surprised at this whole journey. The story is about a guy named Luke, and he is the son of a famous rock star. He has no relationship with the rock star, but Luke is sometimes chased by paparazzi and occasionally is in the news for various things. And one day he ends up in the gutter face down, super drunk, and his job sees this in like the tabloids essentially and is like, hey, you need to clean up your act, we don't like this, and you need to be a model gay and get a boyfriend. So he finds someone to fake date, and that's sort of the story, the setup for the story. I'm sure you can tell, maybe, hopefully, that this setup is not something that I like. It just leaves me very uncomfortable, and the whole model gay thing, while it is called out by everybody in the story, by Luke, his friends, and honestly some of the people he works with as like not being okay, it's never super questioned. I feel like I can't imagine being okay with this in real life. If it happened to me, I don't think I would allow that to happen. I don't know. It's hard to say since I'm not in that situation, but it felt wrong, right? So that was very off-putting to me. And then the whole fake dating situation also was sort of sketch because Luke is such an unlikable character, and his reasons for like wanting to stay at his job aren't very convincing either, because he's kind of just a dickhead, and he has this job that he doesn't seem to care much about, and you're like, why bother with the fake dating? Also, who would want to fake date you? You're kind of awful. So I was just like really not into the story at the beginning, but as soon as Oliver came into the story, everything got better. And that's not to say that he is like the most exciting of characters. I really like Oliver because he's a really good foil to Luke, but I just liked their relationship dynamic. I don't know how I can really get into like super gritty detail without spoiling different parts of the story, but I love the way that the situations that pop up in the book help to ground their relationship and make it make sense. There's so much time spent between the two of them. It just worked. It was a really well-crafted romance, I will say. The story was really strong, and while, like I said, I didn't love the setup for the romance, if you kind of just don't think about it, that sounds bad, but if you are willing to overlook that, I think you'll find that the romance between the two characters is really nice. They really do play off of each other well. I think the author, whenever they were crafting the story, you can tell that they did the practice of sitting down and thinking, what will this character get from the other person, you know, in terms of how will they complement each other and how will they work well together. And it was just so evident in their interactions how well they complemented each other, and I liked that it was kind of messy too. There were a couple of like breakups and other things that occurred that made this a very realistic story, and each character had their own flaws. Obviously, I didn't think Luke was a great character in the beginning, but by the end I realized he had grown a lot, was someone that I actually kind of rooted for. So overall, I think this was a fun romance. The only real criticism I have of it, and the reason this is not going to get 5 stars for me, is because I hate to be that bitch, but it was a fade to black romance, and that's just not my personal preference. I like graphic sex scenes, I guess you can say, and to me that is kind of a hallmark of a traditional romance, and to not have that felt a little bit strange. I wouldn't classify this book as chick lit, but it also didn't really fit the full romance category. I don't know. I mean, there are clean romances, so I guess that's just sort of a me thing, but just my own personal hang up. And then again, like I said, I was sort of uncomfortable with the setup of this book, but overall I think it was a really good romance, and I have to say, compared to the other ones that I've read for this video, this one's gonna be my top. So I'm gonna pull up my graphic right now, and I'm gonna go ahead and slide Boyfriend Material ahead of all of these books. Shocking, I know, but I liked this book, and I am excited to see if there's anything else on this list that surprises me, because going into this really hesitant. The Switch really did not work for me, but this one did, and I'm hoping that the next one does too. I'm actually going to be reading One to Watch by Kate Stayman London. I didn't really know what I was gonna read next, but I saw this at Target and I realized I didn't have a copy of this book. This is one of the only books that I don't have like an ARC or an audiobook of, so now that it's like top of mind, I figured this is what I'll pick up next. Yeah, curious to see if I enjoy this one. I've heard that this one is not super romance focused, so I'm hoping that it proves me wrong, that there is some kind of romance at the center of this, but I know that our main character is plus size, and she is constantly irritated by the fact that this kind of bachelorette type show has never had a plus size heroine, and she ends up getting a chance to be on the show. So I'm curious to see how that goes. I kind of like books sometimes about reality television, so I'm hoping that this one hits the spot, even if it isn't super like romance centered. So I'm gonna start this and I will update you guys probably at the 50% mark.
All right, hopefully you can't hear the fan noise or see the pores in my face, but I had to switch cameras because the lighting was super bad. And honestly, I think this was a great decision. All of that aside, I am about 150 pages from the end of this book. I was going to try to update you 50%, but my camera battery was dead. Anyway, One to Watch by Kate Stayman London. I have lots of feelings about this. I didn't at the 50% mark, so I think it's for the best that I read on. This story is quite interesting. It's about our main character B, who is a plus-size fashion blogger, and one night after getting a little tipsy with her friend and watching this sort of like Bachelor-esque show called Main Squeeze, she writes this blog post on her fashion blog talking about how there's a big lack of diversity on this television show. There's never been anyone plus size, and the racial diversity is sincerely lacking as well. After a series of events, there's a new showrunner, and that showrunner asked B if she would like to be on this show and kind of change the face of television, essentially. Everything kind of happens from there. There is something that I think is like kind of important to note. She ends up sleeping with a friend of hers that she's had a thing for like a really, really long time in the beginning of this book, and it kind of wrecks her emotionally because after she sleeps with this person, he goes back to his fiance afterwards and doesn't talk to her again. Now that she's on the show, he tries to get in contact with her, and I think that'll come up later in the book, but hasn't yet. I'm actually enjoying this. I wasn't sure how to feel at the 50% mark because B was a character that I couldn't personally relate to, and that like doesn't have a ton of bearing on whether a book is good or not, but it does have bearing on whether I can relate and like feel a lot emotionally for a book. I just wasn't sure how I felt about B, but I'm actually really liking her, and I can definitely understand her perspective a lot more now that I am into the story. I'm liking what the story is doing. Now, I'm not plus size, so I obviously don't know if the representation here is like fantastic or not, but I think that this is a book that people of all sizes could relate to because B is in a place with her self-confidence and body acceptance that she feels good, but she still has days where she feels like shit, and people do unfortunately treat her shitty because of the body that she is in, and that's something that is touched on in the book but is not the sole focus of the story. It's having B break down some of the things that have gone on in her life that makes her feel unlovable and makes her untrusting of this process. I mean, she's on reality television, but she is genuinely falling for these guys, and she's wondering if this is real and if she can, you know, trust these people because she already has reason to not trust people in the first place. There's events in the show that happen that make her untrusting of men as well. So it's an interesting exploration into the vulnerability of love, which I'm actually quite enjoying. I wasn't sure if I was going to like that because I was feeling at some points like this was just another story about a plus-size main character not loving themselves, but that's not really what this is, and I think some of the reviews that I read that said that, it's a little reductionist to say that because there's a lot more to it, and B is not saying that she doesn't accept herself and her body, it's just saying that she is fearful of the people who don't accept her for who she is. I am liking the story. I think it is really well told. The only thing I'm a little hesitant about is the fact that I don't know that this is 100% romance. That's not like the worst thing in the world, I guess. I don't know. I said that when I was reading another book and it was the worst thing in the world. This one, I guess, is just such a compelling read that I'm not upset about it, and the fact that there is so much focus on self-acceptance when it comes to love, it kind of makes it feel more romantic, if that makes sense. And it's set on a reality television show where she's supposed to be falling for guys, so to me, I could understand why this is a book that was on the list as opposed to like other things. It is romantic, and it was definitely very hyped up. I haven't heard much about it since, but it was very hyped up, so that's my 2 cents. I'm going to go ahead and finish this, let you guys know what I think, but so far, I mean, so good. I just finished One to Watch by Kate Stayman London, and I ended up really enjoying this book. I feel like this was definitely a lot more romantic than The Switch, and while it wasn't a traditional romance in the sense that it's super steamy and you get to see a lot of like graphic scenes, I definitely think that this could still be categorized as a romance. B goes on a journey with a few different men and ends up finding herself more emotionally open and vulnerable, and at the end she does end up with someone. So I do think this could be considered a romance in that regard, and I ended up really liking who she ended up with. So I just liked the story in general. I feel like there was a level of realism to this that I really wasn't expecting going in. I expected this book to just be pure fluff and pure positivity all of the time, and it's certainly not that. And I think that kind of is something that I want to touch on briefly. I was reading Goodreads reviews and was watching YouTube videos of people talking about this book, and a lot of people didn't like it, and I think that that is because this book is not escapism. If you're looking for a purely body positive escapist story, this is not that. Our main character is body positive, but like anyone, she does still kind of struggle with certain things. She doesn't want to be in a bikini on live television. Some people are reading that as not body positive, and I mean, you can read that however you want. I personally felt like I wouldn't want to be in a bikini on live television either, and everybody's got their hangups, right? And on top of that, B does face some really harsh critics and harsh backlash, and while it's really hard to read about, it is unfortunately realistic, and so I feel like this was a very realistic look at what it would be like to have a plus-size heroine on one of these Bachelorette franchise shows. So if you were looking
looking for escapism, definitely not the book for you. If you're looking for a fun romance with some grit and some realism to it, I think this is really cool. And I think a lot of people can take something away from the message in this book that everybody is capable of vulnerability, everybody can find love, you just have to put yourself out there and trust. I don't know, I just thought it was a really cute book, and again, this is not one that I would go into lightly. I think there is some kind of harmful content in here. It's always questioned, obviously, but this is kind of a mixed media format, which I don't think say previously, and there are like comments on different blog posts and different articles and stuff on here, and some of those are from fat-phobic people, so I think that's important to know if you want to go into this book. Definitely, I wouldn't recommend this to people who are struggling in their own like body positivity journey, so just something I thought I would put out there. I thought this was really good. It's hard though, because I feel like while this was romantic, I don't know where I would put this if I was comparing it to other romances on the list. This definitely is not nearly as romance-centric as something like From Blood and Ash, but I did ultimately enjoy this more than that book, so it's kind of hard to know where to place it. I think I'm going to place it after Boyfriend Material. I think I liked them both a lot. I think this one is probably objectively less romance-centric, but I think I ultimately want to make my rankings on enjoyment and romance. Like, I don't want it to just be, well, these books weren't romance, so I'm not even going to rank them. I mean, they're on the list, so I'd rather just rank them all, and I do want to consider, you know, whether a book was truly romance when I am ranking them, but also this was just good. So I'm gonna put this one after Boyfriend Material, but it's still up there. This is definitely like second on my list. So I really enjoyed this. Next, however, I'm going to be listening to the Happy Ever After playlist by Abby Jimenez. I got this as a audio arc. I can never remember what to call those. This is about our main character whose fiance died a couple of years ago. She's still kind of struggling with the grief from that. I think she finds a dog, and she ends up finding the dog's owner, who happens to be, I believe, a famous musician, and it's about their romance. So I'm excited to see what this book is all about. I'm assuming the topic of grief is going to be very heavy and prevalent in this book, but I'm excited to give it a go. I'm gonna be listening to this probably later today. Probably won't be in a cute outfit like this later today, but I will get back to you guys once I am 50% into this book. All right, I really need to stop telling you guys that I'm gonna update you at a certain percentage, because I really never know how these books are gonna go, and I ended up just completely reading through / listening through the Happy Ever After playlist by Abby Jimenez. I just didn't feel the need to update you guys because this book from the start was, I don't want to say predictable, but I definitely knew the kind of story it was going to be from the first, I don't know, 5 minutes of listening. While that isn't a bad thing, it's just not something that I felt like I really needed to give my thoughts on as I listened or read. The story is basically exactly what I said in the intro to this video, or even the last clip. Basically, it is about our main character, who I literally can't remember the name of, even though I just finished this book 2 minutes ago, which doesn't like bode well for this review, but it is about our heroine who is dealing with the grief of losing her fiance a couple of years ago. She's not dealing with it necessarily in the most healthy way, but in finding this lost dog and reuniting the dog with its owner, she finds a new companion, someone new to love. Not the dog, but the guy. I mean, she loves the dog, but she's with the guy, right? And it's really just about their romance, and he is one of her favorite musicians, and he is on the come up, he is on the rise, and he is going on tour for like months and years at a time, and that sort of is the main conflict in this book. And I say that because this book from the very beginning is really all about their relationship, and that's not a bad thing. I like that this is a true romance. The focus is really on their romantic relationship. However, I felt like from day one, it was romance. And that's not a bad thing. I just personally prefer a little bit more build up in my romantic relationships. And from day one, pretty much, they're flirting, they're texting, they have phone call conversations while she's taking care of his dog while he's like on the last part of this little like tour he's doing for 2 weeks. This is before they initially meet. So even before they've met, they've had some romantic encounters. So when they do meet, it's like, it's nice and it's cute, but it didn't feel like there were any stakes there. And that's kind of how the story continued. Not a bad thing. I really enjoyed their banter and their relationship. I especially liked our hero, Jason, I think his name is. Jason/Jackson is his persona. I thought he was really respectful and kind, and I think if you're looking for a really safe romance, this is it. There is talk of cheating, but there's really no infidelity in this book. There is a lot of talk about grief and understanding grief, and our hero definitely is very understanding of our heroine's grief, but ultimately, I can't even remember the name of the heroine. That's how kind of forgettable this book was. It definitely wasn't bad. It was a very enjoyable read, but I just don't know know that this is something that sticks with me. And again, I hate to bring it up, but I really feel like indie romance is where it's at for me. It has all of the staples that I have come to love. And I think if you're someone who kind of sticks to Wattpad or you're really into fan fiction and you can't seem to find that sort of replication in regular romance or fiction, I feel like you need to give indie a try because it's got all of the tropes that you've come to know and love. The pining, the angst, the enemies to lovers, the, I don't know, the tension there, the stakes. That's what I really like and what I'm really into. And I have not been able to really find a ton of that in traditionally published romance, and this book just kind of, I don't want to say proved that to me, but just was another reminder of how sad I am that there's no indies on this list. Like, I was looking at the other, I think 4 books that I still have to read. Wow, have I read 6 of these? The other 4 books that I have to read, and I'm just like, are any of these going to be a true 5-star read? It's sad. Last year I did have a 5-star traditionally published romance pick, and it was one of my favorite books of the year, but looking at what we've got left, there's still only one book that I think could maybe potentially be a 5-star. And that's kind of sad. I was looking for something more. Anyway, back to the book at hand. This was definitely not terrible. I did enjoy it, but it was just ultimately a 3-star read for me. If I had to rank it, I think I'm going to rank it between From Blood and Ash and Beach Read. It's just okay. I would recommend this if you want a good safe romance, if you kind of want exploration of grief in a story. I think this one did a pretty good job at handling that, but again, ultimately just kind of forgettable for me. And it reminds me of a lot of other books that I've read. So anyway, I am gonna go ahead and start in on In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle. God, I'm lazy. I can't believe I'm just throwing a graphic up right here. I do own this book and I'm gonna be reading it physically, but I'll update you guys whenever I feel like it because I don't know what feelings I'm going to have. I'm assuming I'll probably have feelings at about the 50% mark for this one because I know this one is not a traditional romance. I've heard really mixed things, so fingers crossed I enjoy it. Hopefully it's not too echoey down here. I decided nice change of scenery, big Christmas tree. I am 50% into In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle, and I have no clue how to feel about this book. Okay, where to begin? I really hated the first chapter, and I really didn't know if I was going to be able to get past it because our main character, Dani, is kind of a lot. And by that, I mean she's really boring, but she has a lot of not even opinions. Her life just seems to be a little bit too perfect. It's hard to sympathize with her or care about anything that's happening because it seems like her life is all planned out. And I'm assuming that that setup is supposed to get us to like sympathize with what's coming for her, but even 50% into the book, like I just don't care about her as a person. So she is a high-powered corporate attorney. She just got her dream job and she just got proposed to by her long-term boyfriend. But after this proposal, after their engagement, she wakes up from a nap, or not wakes up from a nap. Yeah, she wakes up from a nap in an alternate reality 5 years in the future where she is engaged to a different man and she's in a very different apartment and her life seems to be very, very different. Now she's only in this alternate reality for an hour and then she's transported back into present day. She is left reeling because it didn't feel like a dream. It really felt like an alternate reality for her, and this is something that stuck with her. 4 years later, she ends up meeting that man who she was like engaged to in the future. He keeps reappearing in her life and it is hard to not spoil this book, but I don't like what the author is doing. I don't appreciate it. I know there's really only one way for our main character to be able to get with the hero of the story, and I really, really hate that that's how the story is playing out. I really don't want to get too into detail about it, but you are left with this anxiety as you're reading because you're like, this guy keeps showing up in her life and you keep rooting for her to get with him all the while she is with this guy who she's planning a wedding with. And also you're sort of like, once you get to the kind of pivot point in the story where you're like, oh, this is a way that they could get together, you're like, are you kidding? Like it's the only way that they could be together. And in my head I knew that going in, but I'm just like insulted almost that this is the way the story is going. I'm gonna put a spoiler mark right here so that I can kind of talk more in depth about like what I'm talking about. But anyway, the guy that Dani saw in her dream was or is her best friend's boyfriend, and the only way that she can be with her best friend's boyfriend is if her best friend dies. I hate that. This story is only 250 pages. There's absolutely no way that in 250 pages you're going to get an actual romance out of this when there's no romance to speak of right now and her friend's dying of cancer. I really hate that. I just don't like the setup of this book because you are led to believe that this guy who she is engaged to in the future, like that should be the guy that she's with, right? And so you are like rooting for him this entire time, even though you should not be. And it leaves you with this uneasy feeling as you're reading, and it does not feel good. And it feels even worse when the plot things that happened in this book. I am really not doing this book justice, but I'm not really like loving it. I'm not hating it, but it's hard to enjoy. When I tell you I hated every single solitary second that I was reading this book, I think that'd be actually pretty accurate. I said that I didn't know how I felt about this book, but I didn't like most of it, and then the end came and I was like, are you fucking kidding me? This was so pointless in so many ways. Like, if you're trying to read this as a romance, it's 100% pointless. If you're trying to read this as heartwarming or inventive or really anything, I don't think it accomplishes that at all. I'm just so upset that this exists in the world. That's so mean, and I feel so mean saying it, but I really hated it, and I have no other way to really explain it besides spoiling it again. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the spoiler warning up again, and we can talk about why I hated this book so much. I cannot believe that this got published, and it was not poorly written, let me tell you. It was compulsively readable, and I can understand why people would feel compelled to continue to read this book. However, what was the fucking point? So our main character, Dani, she sees into the future. She sees this guy who's dating her best friend, and she has sex with him in this dream. It does come into fruition, it does come to be, but she doesn't even end up with that guy. At least we're not led to believe that. So this is really just a story about someone's life becoming immeasurably shitty, having their best friend die, and losing their fiance. That's really all I got from this, and it wasn't poignant, it was not meaningful, it did not do anything special or different that other books have not done. I'm just kind of insulted that like all of the blurbs on the back make this sound like it is revolutionary, and it is just so not that. It is so not that. It's pretty, I will give it that. It is a pretty book, but this pissed me off so much, and I'm angry that I read this. I'm angry that I gave this book my time. It didn't even take that much of my time to read, but like I'm very angry. This will be on my worst books of the year list, and I know a lot of people liked this, and I think if you have a kinder, gentler soul than I, you could perhaps find enjoyment from this, but I am not that kind and gentle soul, and I really hated this. I don't know. I really have something against tearjerkers to begin with, so that could definitely, I mean, that's definitely a me thing, but if you read this book critically, I think you'll come to find that there really was no point, and that's the thing. I'm all for a good twist, but when the twist has no fucking point. Where to rank this? Dead last. Surprise, surprise. I'm giving this book 1 star. I really am just like in awe of the fact that, like I said, this book got published, that this was on the Goodreads Choice Awards in the category of romance. It's like kind of insulting to me. We're gonna put this at number 7 after The Switch. I thought The Switch was bad. I didn't think it could get worse, and yet here we are. And I think people are gonna think I'm dramatic if they've read this book, but I'm sorry. This was quite upsetting to me. It's like life sucks, then you die. Hate it. I hate it so much. Moving on to the next book. Let me pull up my handy dandy list and we can decide what we're gonna read next, because I haven't even thought about it. Let's go with You Had Me at Ola. I think I need something that's a little bit less try hard. I was gonna try the Colleen Hoover next, but I don't think I have the emotional and mental capacity for that right now. So let's try You Had Me at Ola, then we'll read Regretting You, and then we'll finish off with Piece de Resistance. I can't talk today. Take Hint, Dani Brown, which I'm sure is going to be the best book of all of these. But anyway, first we gotta start out with You Had Me at Ola. I'm gonna be reading this physically. I have an arc of it that I never got around to, and it's gonna be a grand old time. Nothing can be worse than this book. It's only up from here. Okay, so I just finished You Had Me at Ola. I thought it was fine. It was not anything to write home about, but it definitely wasn't a terrible book. I just didn't feel the need to update you guys because the plot was super linear. There were no twists. It was nothing mind-blowing. Basically, the story is about our main character, Jasmine, who was in a lot of soap operas, and she finally landed the starring role in a show that's like a remake of a telenovela. It is a show for Netflix, so all of the episodes are filmed and then put, you know, online. Her co-star is named Ashton, and he is a little bit older than her. He's like 40. He has been in a lot of telenovelas, but he has not been able to break out into like mainstream Hollywood, and that is kind of his ultimate goal. So the story is kind of just about them and their time on this show together, falling for each other and learning to trust each other after some of the kind of baggage that they have. It wasn't bad. I just really felt a lack of chemistry between our two main characters. Even though the like steamier scenes were pretty solidly written, I just didn't really care for the characters, and I honestly was kind of irritated at both of them at multiple different points in the story, so it made it kind of hard to care and root for the two of them together. I think part of that also might have been me picking up the audio rather than just reading the arc that I have, but I don't know if I would have been able to get through the book if I hadn't picked it up on audio, so I think that was like the right decision for me. Part of, I think, my issue was that I could really pick up on the fact that the writing was this sort of like weird third person that I don't really love. It's that really close third person where it's kind of told from the main character's points of view, but it's not like them saying I, you know what I mean? Most of the indie romance that I read is written in a dual POV and it's first person, and that makes sense to me. Having a dual POV but third person is very like odd to listen to. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure if like any of these thoughts are super coherent, but I just was not super in love with the story. I really liked Jasmine's family, which I think kind of saved the story a little bit for me. But beyond that, I just didn't care that much. And honestly, like Ashton's backstory was, I don't know, it was just hard for me to care, which sounds so bad because he obviously had like been through some things, but I guess I didn't understand why his baggage made it harder for him to open up to Jasmine. It was just fine. It was an okay book. Don't know if this would be like a best romance for me, definitely. And I don't think a lot of people who read this book were super like overwhelmingly impressed either. So I don't know, I feel pretty confident about giving this like 2.5 or 3 stars. And I think I'm gonna pull the graphic up right now. I think I'm going to rank this in between the Happy Ever After playlist and Beach Read. It's like number 5 out of 8 right now. Not a bad spot. It's just like not something that I absolutely adored. It is romance, so it's like decently still high on the list, but it wasn't everything to me. Next though, I am going to start in on Regretting You by Colleen Hoover. I am very nervous about this book. I know it's got kind of like a mother-daughter dual POV thing. Since Colleen Hoover started in sort of like the indie realm, her writing is really easy for me to get into, and I feel like she usually uses first-person POVs in her stories, so I think this is going to be something that is easier for me to read and get through than this book was, but I guess we shall see. All right, probably a little bit premature in updating you guys, but I am 26% into Regretting You by Colleen Hoover, and I'm actually not hating it, and that's kind of why I wanted to come talk to you. I hit the twist at the 20% mark, and I can tell you I was not expecting it, and even though I think a lot of people probably hated the twist, I kind of liked it, probably because I didn't see it coming, but it's so messy and so drama-filled and so over the top that I like it. I don't know, I'm sort of like hit or miss when it comes to messy plot twists. Sometimes I think they're overdone and can ruin a story. Sometimes I just like to lean into the cheese, so this is actually doing it for me, and I also kind of like the way that the romances are playing out so far. So let me try to explain what the story is about, because I think it's a little convoluted and sort of hard to explain. But this book is about our 2 main characters, Morgan and Clara. Morgan starts out the story and she is the intro chapter. She is in the car with her boyfriend, her sister, and her sister's boyfriend, and they are going to a party, and in the car we're kind of just in Morgan's mind, and she's kind of telling us a little bit about her personality and her relationships with the people that are in the car. Then she winds up pregnant, or she thinks she might be pregnant, and we find out she's pregnant the next chapter because it is from the POV of her daughter, Clara. It is an interesting story. Morgan was 17 when she had Clara, and so that adds kind of an interesting dynamic to the story, because in the intro we find out that Morgan doesn't necessarily love her boyfriend so much, but we find out that she ends up marrying him and, you know, having Clara. So that's kind of a layer of interestingness. On top of that, the other guy in the car, her sister's boyfriend, Jonah, is someone that she kind of had a crush on, and they have sort of like miscommunication-y trope situation going on. You can tell that they both kind of liked each other back in the past. They kind of like each other now in the present, and things are complicated. Here's some more complication for you. Jenny is Morgan's sister, the one that was in the car with her. Jenny and Jonah end up reuniting later on in life. They don't stay, you know, high school sweethearts, but they do reunite later on, and they end up having a baby kind of like unexpectedly. So Jenny and Jonah are together, and Morgan and Chris, I think is his name, are together. In this present day situation, they're 30 years old. There's a little baby named Elijah that's Jenny and Jonah's, and then Clara is obviously Chris and Morgan's. So that's that, but mess and drama ensues quickly, and I have such specific tropes and specific relationship situations that I enjoy, and this book is kind of doing that in a messy way, but I'm enjoying it. So I'm gonna have to put a spoiler warning to kind of explain what that means, but I'm having a good time for those of you that don't want the spoilers. So spoiler warning. Essentially what happens is we have Jenny texting Clara at one point, and then she just kind of stops texting Clara out of the blue, and we find out that Jenny, Morgan's sister, Clara's aunt, gets in a car accident with Chris, Clara's dad. And I think we're led to believe that Jenny and Chris have been having an affair, and they might have been having an affair over like a 17-year period. And I think that we're gonna find out like secrets unravel after this car accident, in which they both die. I should mention, Jenny, Chris, dead. I guess what's gonna happen, I could be wrong here, I think what's going to happen is that there's going to be some sort of relationship between Jonah and Morgan, and then Clara is going to have a romance with kind of not the bad boy in town, but misunderstood guy in town. I think that's what the story is going to be, but I think the way that the relationships are set up is something that I'm really enjoying. I really like the kind of, it's not even a true miscommunication trope, it's more of like a miscommunication unrequited love situation, and unrequited love is absolutely my favorite romance trope. I'm really figuring that out as I get older. I love a good unrequited romance trope, but when the love it is unrequited on both sides, like they both think it's unrequited but they both love each other, it gets me every time. So that's kind of what's happening, I think, between Clara and her Turbo. We don't know much about them yet, but I definitely think we're going to find out more about them. And then that's gonna probably happen, I think, between Jonah and Morgan, which is good because Morgan is in a situation where she's wanting her life to change. She's devoted so much of her life to being a mother. She never got to go to college and she never really got to explore any of her own interests. So I think it's going to be her self-discovery and her kind of figuring out that maybe she can have love with someone who might, I don't know, be better for her. I don't know. I never really liked Chris. He was not a bad guy in the intro, but I just like kind of didn't care about him. So it's messy, but I'm kind of here for it. Like I said, the whole unrequited mutual pining, that's another, mutual pining, there you go. Mutual pining, unrequited miscommunication. Put it all together, it's my shit, so I'm liking this. I'm also just remembering, I'm gonna take the spoiler warning away and talk a little bit more about just like general things I'm enjoying. I kind of forgot how much I liked Colleen Hoover's writing style. It is, I think, indicative of a lot of what I love about indie writing. And I think I sort of misspoke when I said that there weren't very many indie books on this list. I mean, it is true. We really only have this and From Blood and Ash. It's poignant without being too purple, and it evokes emotion from me, which I appreciate. I don't necessarily always love Colleen Hoover's storylines, but I do like her writing, and it's something that is very compulsively readable, so I'm not upset about this. I am kind of enjoying it. I don't know how this is gonna rank among the other stories that I've read, but so far so good. I'll update you guys again once I know more about the story and have formed more concrete feelings on where the story is going, but thus far, it's good. Not me liking Colleen Hoover book. Let's chat. I ended up actually really enjoying Regretting You. It was an enjoyable read. I don't know what else to say about it. I think I talked way too long in my first clip, so I don't want to go too much more into detail, but everything that I talked about liking in the first clip is stuff that continued on. The only thing that I thought was a little frustrating was the lack of clarity about everything. I wanted to know more about the drama, and we didn't really get any answers, which I guess is sort of realistic, and like, that is life, right? Some of the plot things that happened weren't solved in a way that I personally liked, but that's because I'm messy and I really wanted the drama. But other than that, I liked the relationships enough in this book, and since this is a video reading Goodreads romances, I can tell you that I enjoyed the romantic relationships in this book. Now, was it really a romance? That's kind of the question. I don't really know how I would categorize this book. It felt more like a romance than The Switch and In 5 Years because there were two romantic relationships, they did play out, but the story wasn't necessarily all about romance. I mean, it kind of was. Like, I think this book does break down the walls of genre a little bit, and I think Colleen Hoover says that in the acknowledgements of this book. She does kind of point out that it is not a pure like strict romance. It is a little bit about the mother-daughter relationship, but I don't know, I liked it, and I'm not gonna apologize for it, and I think I'm just gonna go with my gut for these ratings. I feel like I've been kind of hard on myself and trying to be very scientific, but you know what, enjoyment of fiction is not necessarily scientific, so I don't really feel that bad. So let me tell you, I think I'm going to rank this one just below From Blood and Ash. Boyfriend material, one to watch, From Blood and Ash, Regretting You, The Happy Ever After playlist, You Had Me at Ola, Beach Read, The Switch, and In 5 Years. Now that I'm looking at it, I feel like I might in my head switch One to Watch and Boyfriend Material, but I don't know. I think honestly like the top 4 of these rankings are kind of interchangeable to me. Like, I enjoyed them all for different reasons and kind of equally, but I think I'm okay with how they are so far. Okay, so I was just editing the clips for this video and I lost like the last half of what I was filming, but I was just hyping the hell out of this book. I was so excited to pick it up, happy that I saved it for last, and upon actually starting the book, I can definitely say with confidence that that was a really good decision to make because I'm glad to be finishing this video strong. This book is fantastic. Only 100 pages in, but it is easily the best book that I've read so far, and I can't really see anything changing that. So I don't really know how much I've talked about this book, but it is about our main character, Danica, Dani Brown, and she is a PhD student, and she is friends with this guy named Zafir or Zaf. They have this sort of like passing friendship kind of thing. She is a teacher right now, like she's getting her PhD and she's teaching, and the building that she teaches in, she passes by the same security guard every day, Zaf, and they've kind of struck up a friendship. She will bring him a black coffee and he will give her a protein bar every morning. After this sort of fire drill gone wrong, he ends up rescuing her kind of from the building. She gets trapped in an elevator during a fire drill. He saves her and carries her out fireman style, and someone takes a video and they kind of have to fake date from there. Zaf has his own sort of like charitable endeavor. He's trying trying to bring like mental health awareness to rugby and like have it be a way to facilitate mental health discussions, I guess. So he coaches boys that are in their teens, and after the like video of him saving Dani goes viral, they decide to fake date because it looks really good for Zaf and gets more awareness onto his charity. And Dani has just kind of broken up with her most recent fling. She's not really into relationships, and she decides like, hey, this might be a good idea for me because I kind of want someone to hook up with. Don't want a relationship, but like I'll fake date you, maybe you, and it'll be a good time. So I don't know if I'm doing a good job explaining this. I feel like that was really all over the place, but this is so good. Absolutely adore Dani's character. I really liked Chloe Brown because of the plotline, and I really liked Red as a character. The male love interest in the first book, he was great, but something about the instant chemistry that both of these characters have is so lovely. I love the whole opposites attract thing going on. Zaf is definitely gruff, but he's not as gruff as Red was in the first book, and him handling Dani's sense of humor is just perfect. I think that is what is setting this book apart for me from all of the other books that I've read thus far. There is so much chemistry and the banter is so well written. I guess I take for granted how hard it is to write dialogue for books that is compelling and interesting and funny, and I've laughed out loud multiple times reading this. Hayden has been like, what are you laughing about in there? It's this book, and I'm only 100 pages in, so I'm sure that it's gonna get even funnier from here, but this is so good. And I knew it was gonna be good, and I kind of am kicking myself for not picking this up earlier. My cats are making a ruckus outside of my office, but I don't know, I'm loving it. Thank you for the present. Do you want to come say hi? Nugget likes to bring me gifts, and he screams when he does it. Anyway, I am going to continue reading this. I don't know how often I'll update you guys, but I'm hoping that I can finish this today and then finish this video today and then look at what actually won the Goodreads Choice Awards in the category of romance. That was a lot. Now I'm out of breath. Okay, I'm gonna go. Okay, Nugget's purring in the background, so I'm sorry if you can hear that, but I'm halfway done with Take a Hint, Dani Brown, and I just had to update you guys because this is so good, and I think I am realizing that the relationship dynamic between Zaf and Dani is kind of similar to myself and my fiance. Like, he is very Zaf-like, just very like thoughtful and romantic and sweet, and I'm just like kind of neither of those things. But they're so cute together. I love this. There's so much that I'm appreciating that I keep forgetting to tell you guys. I think the mental health representation is super fantastic in this. I think it's very realistic, and it's just an added layer to the story. It doesn't feel like that is the sole focus of the story. I don't love super like topical romances, if you will. I like when the characters feel real and they have issues, but it's not like the story is not about their issues. Do you know what I mean? Like, people have problems and things to work through, and having that included in a romance I think just adds depth to it, and I like that a lot. I like that he has anxiety and panic attacks, and that's just something he deals with. What else do I like? Oh my god, I was just thinking about this. I fucking love how casual everything is in this book. Like, there's so much casual queerness, which is fucking awesome. Dani is bi, and I think her grandma might like women as well. I think that's what I got from this. I think her grandmother has a girlfriend, so that's really awesome. And her grandma was like, you know, I hope one day you have a wedding to like a man or a woman or whoever you're interested in, and I thought that was awesome. I also love the casual body diversity. I'm pretty sure that both Dani and Zaf are like plus size. It's not like dated explicitly on paper, but the way that both of them are described, it feels like that, and the cover images kind of lead you to believe that. I just like it. I love that it's not like this is a story about body positivity, but you have two characters who aren't super tiny. I'm so sick of the heroines of stories being like fucking teacup chihuahuas. They're like, oh my god, I'm just so small. I've always been so small and I can fit in the palm of his hand. Like, I hate that so much. Like, I know small people exist, but can we get some more like casual body diversity in books? Please, thank you. Okay, that's all I have to say. They haven't even boned yet, but I think it's gonna be hot when they do, and I like this, and I will update you probably when I'm finished. So I had my fancy camera out for another video, so I figured, you know, who wouldn't appreciate the increased camera quality at the end of this video? I just finished Take a Hint, Dani Brown. I adored this, and this was, in a word, perfect. I gave this book 5 stars. This is obviously the winner for me of the Goodreads Choice Award in the category of romance. It was so good. I knew that it was gonna be good. I had a feeling that I would like this, especially when this was pitched to me as something that was going to be slightly smuttier than Get a Life, Chloe Brown, and it was smuttier. It was just everything that I really wanted, and it was so good. I cried, I swooned, I laughed, just all of the things. This was amazing. I don't know that I have much else to say beyond what I said in the previous clips, but I think the conclusion to this was also really satisfying and not too drawn out. I really don't like that like third act breakup that always happens in romance, or like that horrible conflict that always comes up. In this book, I feel like it was very reasonable and it was not too drawn out. That was one of the complaints that I had when I read Chloe Brown. I feel like there were a couple of times when there were conflict, and I felt like it was one conflict too many. And here, perfect amount of conflict. That's not to say that this was just some like easy breezy ride. There were some serious topics dealt with, like Zafira's anxiety and Dani's, not fear of abandonment, but her like past relationship struggles, and just seeing them come together and kind of fight through the issues that they had to form a successful relationship was just fucking beautiful. Love this book. Could not recommend this book more. Like, it was fantastic. So obviously this is getting the #1 slot. I'm gonna go ahead and put up my rankings again on the screen, and we can kind of talk through them before I go and look at what the winner is of the Goodreads Choice Awards. Ooh, I'm excited. So pulling up my rankings right now, I ended up switching a couple of books around just because I feel like some books were more memorable than others, right? So in the first place spot, we obviously have Take a Hint, Dani Brown, but I ended up switching Boyfriend Material and One to Watch. For me, I just feel like One to Watch was a little bit more impactful, and I haven't read a story like this before, so I don't know, I liked it. I know that this one's kind of controversial, and I know some people really didn't like it, but I don't know, I just felt it was really realistic. Even though it wasn't a completely fluffy read, I really liked this book. Next up, we have Boyfriend Material. I really liked this. I think if I'm going based on enjoyment, I think Boyfriend Material, From Blood and Ash, and Regretting You, I think we're all kind of on the same level. I liked them all for different reasons, so I think they're kind of arbitrary rankings, but I have Boyfriend Material, then From Blood and Ash, then Regretting You, and then we get down to the books that I kind of just felt meh about. The Happy Ever After playlist and You Had Me at Ola. Neither were bad books, but neither were like all-out favorites for me. Beach Read, same. Honestly, I think those three down there kind of all the same to me. I don't know, they were fine, but just not like standouts. And then we have The Switch and In 5 Years, both of which I really didn't enjoy, and I'll be interested to see where they end up on the winners list because I don't think they should be on the list at all. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and look at the winners of the Goodreads Choice Award. I have my laptop in front of me, that's why I'm like looking down. Okay, whew. All right, not surprised. I could be wrong, but I think my predictions were either From Blood and Ash or Beach Read would win. And as you can see, From Blood and Ash won. I feel like that makes a lot of sense. I think this book was highly buzzed about, and I actually like that, as much as I complained that there weren't any indies on this list, that the winner was an indie-ish romance, because I think it's getting a lot more attention now. I think indie is something that is really making a splash, and I just love to see it. So I'm glad that this book won, I guess. I don't know. I don't think it should have been the winner, but like, I'm not mad at it. It makes sense. Okay, moving on, I'm gonna pull up the full rankings for you guys. Beach Read at #2. I feel okay about that. I mean, I knew people would really enjoy that book, but it was just kind of whatever for me. What is atrocious is In 5 Years being in the #3 slot. The fact, I mean, it got nearly half of the votes that Beach Read got, but also, it was horrible and I hated it. I hated every second of it. I don't really understand how this could be even nominated for romance. Like, it's just, why? Regretting You at #4, I'm not super upset about because I actually did enjoy that one. Boyfriend Material at 5, I understand. Take a Hint, Dani Brown being at #6. Like, I don't understand that. I don't understand it. I think I said this last year, but if you can take anything away from this video, it is to pick up Take a Hint, Dani Brown, because I think it's severely underrated. This got, what? I can't do the math, but it only got 26,000 votes. In comparison to From Blood and Ash's 70,000 votes, which means not that many people read this book, and you need to read this book. It's so good. Then we have One to Watch, the Happy Ever After playlist, The Switch, and You Had Me at Ola. I think You Had Me at Ola is a little bit too low on the list. I think The Switch and In 5 Years should be at the bottom, but you know, that's just me. I'm gonna go ahead and put up the rankings, like my rankings versus the Goodreads Choice Award rankings. Some of them are in similar spots. The Switch is in the exact same spot in my rankings and in Goodreads rankings, but everything else is sort of like switched around, kind of. So I don't know that I have super profound thoughts after doing this little reading challenge. I will say there were not as many books that I was excited about this time around, primarily because most or a lot of these books just weren't romance, or they weren't romances that I personally would have picked up on my own. So I don't know if I'll do this next year. I think I might. I don't know. You guys let me know if you want to see me do this again. Maybe, especially if the nominees are just incredible next year, I'll probably have to do it, but I don't know. This was not as exciting, I feel like, this time around as it was last year, but I guess I'm kind of glad to see what is popular, or I'm glad I got to see what is popular and why it's popular. I guess that's fun. I don't know. I'm trying to find some sort of like profound meaning in this, and there really isn't. It's just me reading books. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I know this video was obscenely long, but I appreciate you guys watching. Love you guys so much, and until next Sunday.